Evangelion qadishad marani shom shiha karazutha adluqa shuhan shiha amin
And Jesus told them a parable, saying, "The land of a rich man brought forth plentifully. And he thought to himself, 'What shall I do, for I have nowhere to store my crops?' And he said, 'I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul is required of you. The things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is he who lays up treasures for himself and is not rich towards God.' And he said to his disciples, 'Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you shall eat, nor about your body, what you shall put on. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothing. Consider the ravens. They neither sow nor reap. They have neither storehouse nor barn, and yet God feeds them. How much more value are you than the birds? And which of you, by being anxious, can add a cubit to his lifespan? If then you are not able to do as small a thing as that, why are you anxious about the rest? Consider the lilies, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass, which is alive in the field today and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O men of little faith? And do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be of anxious mind. For all the nations of the world seek these things, and your Father knows that you need them. Instead, seek his kingdom, and these things shall be yours as well. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Provide yourselves with purses that do not grow old, with a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there will be your heart also."
وشوحا لا لها من عين شوحا لمشي Good morning. Today is a day that we can praise and thank God, specifically for Deacon Marcus. Deacon Marcus has been with us for the past year as our deacon here at St. George. And this is actually his last weekend as a deacon. He will be ordained a priest this coming Saturday, July 4th. So when you're eating your kebab and everything, you can remember him. On July 4th at 11 a.m., he will become a priest. So we thank God for his awesome vocation. Deacon Marcus doesn't like attention, so I'm going to give him a little more attention. Deacon and I actually grew up together in the same church, serving the same church, similar to Sister Amanda. So we're all original West Siders, but God gave us our passports to the East Side. And now you guys have welcomed us openly, so we're happy to be your nuns, your priests. And so we're glad for Deacon Marcus. And so I just really ask that you pray for him, as well as Deacon Kevin. Deacon Kevin will be our third priest here at St. George. He'll be starting in August, so we'll have 3 priests now here at St. George. And so we just ask that you pray for them both as they approach the altar and as they give their lives completely to the priesthood and to our Lord. So if you can give him some helhole, he loves it. So congratulations.
Good. Thank you for the prayers. I greatly appreciate it. And it's been my honor to be with you all for the past year. Thank you. So today's gospel begins with Jesus giving the parable of the rich fool. And the way the gospel begins is with two Jews coming up to Jesus, and they're expecting him to solve a dispute. This was very common for Jews at the time, to take their cases, whether it might be family affairs or property affairs or money affairs, and if they got into kind of an argument with another Jew, they would go to a rabbi who was well known in the community, and the rabbi would give his judgment on the case. And so that's what they did with Jesus. They brought their argument before Jesus, but Jesus doesn't answer the argument. What he does instead is he gives us a story of the rich fool. And so instead of giving the judgment, he gives the story. But Jesus in this story has a message for all Christians and what their attitude should be towards possessions. You see, what is the point of the story? What is the point of the rich landowner and calling him a fool? There are two things to keep in mind about the rich fool in this story. The first is that the rich fool cannot see beyond himself. The second, the rich fool cannot see beyond this world. Now, before we start, it's important to understand that Jesus does not call him a fool because of his hard work ethic, because of his industriousness of putting together all this fortune. It's not why. That's missing the point. Rather, he calls him a fool because of his selfishness, his self-centeredness. If we see the other gospel stories about the rich that Jesus speaks about, the rich man and Lazarus, for example, in the previous chapters, the rich fool in this story, just like them, has lost the capacity for love. He's lost the capacity to care for others. He only knows how to care for himself. If we take a look at the language that Jesus uses in the passages, what we'll notice is that there's a lot of kind of aggressive pronouns such as I, me, mine. I will tear down the barns. I will put up my fortune in those barns. It's my fortune. It's all focused towards himself, not towards others. And so because of this, he's incapable of love. He can only think of himself. His life, in a sense, becomes defined by what he owns, by how much money he has. And so he lived as if this world was the only one. He could not see beyond the world. Now the Romans, it's important to kind of understand where this is coming from, right? The Romans had this ancient saying. They said, money was like seawater. The more you drink seawater, because it's so salty, you'll never be fully quenched of your thirst. You'll always want more and more water. But the more seawater you drink, the thirstier you become. The more money you seek in life, the more it's never satiated. You always want more and more money. And if that becomes our ultimate goal in life, we're completely missing the point as Christians. And so the attitude of the rich fool is completely opposite to what Jesus is trying to teach us about how we should treat our possessions in this world. Now, coming down to the second thing, he could not see beyond this world to the next. All of his plans were made on the basis of life here, and he could not see beyond the world. You can imagine a conversation between an old wise man who's kind of lived a full life and a young man who's just kind of beginning his life and has all these ambitions. You can kind of imagine kind of this conversation that goes on between them. The old man would ask the younger man, what is it that you want to accomplish in your life? And the younger man says, well, I guess I'll build my skill. I'll go to college, I'll get my degree, and I'll kind of pick up some skills in the way. And the old man says, and then what? And then the young man replies, I guess I'll build a business. The old man replies, and then what? Well, I guess I'll make my fortune, my money. And the old man replies, and then what? Well, I guess I'll retire with my fortune, I'll grow old, and I'll just kind of spend the money I have and just kind of relax. And then, of course, the old man says, and then what? Well, I guess one day I'll die, says the young man. And as you can guess, he says, and then what? The young man doesn't have an answer. Because this last question is one that stabs at all of us in the heart, right? We are terrified of the unknown realities of death. When life is robbed of us, when it looks like it's robbed of us, it's unknown, it's scary. We don't know what to do. But what does it all mean? Without Jesus, life and death is utterly meaningless. So if Jesus shows us and promises us that there is something beyond death, beyond this temporary world, that there is some sort of permanent world where you will live forever in joy and everlasting peace, then what are we to be afraid of? And the one who dies without remembering this fact will lose his soul. As God says in the gospel, when he talks to the rich man, your soul will be required of you tonight. Right? If you forget this promise of Christ, if you don't live the next world, you're ultimately forfeiting your soul. With the recent coronavirus outbreak, many of us were forced to kind of face death in the face. A lot of us were very scared, especially at the beginning, and even now. We all know somebody who might have passed away from it, and so we're forced to look at death in the face and kind of confront it. And we've kind of in a sense, lost control of our lives, because before this all, we could control every aspect of our lives, but the coronavirus took away our businesses, right? Might have kind of taken a hit in our wallet. Whatever it might be, a lot of people lost their jobs. We must understand that these things of the world will disappear. They won't last forever. We can't take our wealth with us to heaven. We can't buy our way into heaven. So we have to store up the riches of heaven. Lastly, the last part of the gospel always kind of strikes me, right? Because it kind of really talks about our life here in the West, especially as kind of Chaldeans, right? We've done well for ourselves here, especially in the U.S., and there's so many choices, right? There's, for example, like Chanel bags that we can choose from. There's Ferragamo shoes, things of that nature. We like nice things, right? And so Jesus commands us in the gospel. He says, do not be anxious about what food you're going to eat or about what you will put on with your body. He says, don't be anxious about these things. And the word anxious here means to be of two minds, to be thrown about, to be overly concerned with these things. Why be overly concerned with these things? Do our possessions define us? Is that what we allow to define us? Is the things that we own, the money that we have? Or do we place all of our security on God? This is the important thing we have to keep in mind today for the rest of our lives as Christians. And so, kind of just a challenge, if we're already praying, we're already reading the scriptures daily, but we're not giving alms, as Jesus says, if we're not giving to the poor, if we're not giving to the church so they complete their work on serving the less fortunate, on serving the faithful, on building up our faith, this is where we have to focus on, right? And so maybe as kind of a challenge, that money that you would spend on, I love Lent, how some people they'll give up coffee every day, or buying Starbucks at least, and that's $2 to $5 a day, and they'll save up that money. At the end of the month, they'll give it to a charity, right? Or they'll give it to the church. That's their alms. Why not incorporate that into our daily prayer? Instead of, buying maybe the latest handbag or the latest shoes, or even the latest car, maybe we'll put aside that money and we'll give it to a charity of our choice. God has blessed us with so much. The least we can do is offer it to those who need it. Amen?